I think it's super important for women to share their stories. And I have a whole page dedicated to sharing their stories. So when you reach out to me to share story time, I'm not sitting up here weighing your story time on the basis of is this life changing or not? Sometimes it's am I overwhelmed with content? Sometimes it's are you hitting me at the exact right time where I could just post your story time? I say this because this woman is just downplaying her narrative simply because she doesn't think it's important enough. And I'm certainly going to do it because, yeah, let's just read it a little bit. She says, I hesitate to reach out to you because my question or concern is not serious by any means. And because it isn't serious, I don't want to take away from your discussing more helpful topics. But if you have time to respond or share with your community, I would love to hear someone else's take or advice regarding my concerns fetishized, about being fetishized by the men I date. I know many of the men who are interested in me fetishize me, and I do a pretty good job of weeding them out. But sometimes I worry that the ones I have given a chance are just smarter about not being obvious. Then there's another part of me that wonders if my concern is rooted in some sort of self esteem issue or even worse, internalized misogyny. Oh, the joys of being so self aware. So, this is where I say, sharing our narratives is so important. And even if you're not seeing yourself exactly in this woman's situation, self esteem issues, being fetishized, being dehumanized are common tropes that women go through, no matter what you think is serious or not. This is common themes that we face as women. Being dehumanized in general will like overlap in so many of our communities, and we need to share our narratives. Okay, she says, I also have a potential story time based on jury duty, on a jury duty experience where a Dusty not only brought himself down, but the women in his life. If you're interested, it was somehow both a hilarious and heartbreaking story. So she has two very different stories, and if I can, I'm going to just squish them together depending on the time frame. Okay, so more context. The only two semi serious previous relationships I had have me a little nervous. One was black, but I was not his preference. His history was dating white or non black women, but I definitely think that I was a fat fetish for him and that he saw me as a challenge because I am spirited, a feminist, and quirky. He tried to tame me and it didn't work. Shortly after, he got a mutual acquaintance who was his preference pregnant and abandoned her and their child. The other guy was a white country boy who treated me so well, like he set the bar. We broke up because I moved away and we remained good friends. In 2020 and 2021, while we were friends, I discovered he was a Trump supporter. Not an alt right insurrectionist type, but still a Trump supporter. When I expressed disappointment, he wrote me a long message about being pro BLM and how much he loved me, blah, blah, blah. I could never look at him the same way anymore. Okay, she says, so my fetishization story first. My concerns about being fetishized are multidimensional or at least two dimensional. I am a black woman and I am fat. So I'm a black woman in my late 30s who currently wears a size 20 or 22. I have been plus size, overweight, whatever you want to call it, my entire life, with the exception of a few years that my eating disorder got me down to a size 8 or 10 and nearly killed me. I date white men primarily, and if I had to quantify, I'd say my roster has been about 85% white. I've dated one black man and one Asian man. I know that I am not most men's cup of tea. I have always known that. I am really funny, artistic, intelligent, kind, and other great personality based things. But I only realized in the last couple of years that I am also quite pretty. I am both elated and devastated by this realization so late in life. I wish I'd known that I was pretty before now. So, as I said, I know that I am not every man's cup of tea, but there are men who are super into me. Now, right here, she asked for advice, but I believe that that there is some internalized misogyny or some self-esteem where you're like, doubting yourself, and that internal dialogue, like, Why would he even like me? Sets up men that might even have good intentions to be like, you'll be looking at them like he must think I am a fetish or whatever. He must have a fetish. Because if you already have self doubts about yourself and being pretty, then you're going to be looking at others like, what could he possibly see in me? So that's what I'm seeing as I'm reading it. She says, with all that being said, I know that some men, white or otherwise, fantasize about sleeping with black and or fat women, but they usually out themselves with compliments about my curves or skin tone or black features. I do not engage further with those men at all. The other dimension of this is that I'm also the dream girl of men who are into a very niche type of woman. Some might describe me as alt or alternative, quirky, etc. I have been heavily involved in the punk scene for decades, have quite a few tattoos, and work in tech. All of the examples I can readily think of are white women, but think Jess from New Girl, Summer from 500 Days of Summer, or Garcia from Criminal Minds, but way, way edgier. Where I live now, there is virtually no punk scene. But when I lived in other cities, I've attracted men with similar interests, which make more sense to me than the men who are interested in me where I currently live. I'm currently seeing two white men who are 7 to 9 years younger than me and super into me. We go out on dates and whatnot, but aren't serious enough to meet families yet. I've met a few friends though. One is a finance bro, and the other also works in tech. Both are tall, thin, and in shape, and unbearably good looking. So I can't help but wonder if they're actually into me or if I just fulfill some BBW black woman kink. We don't share as much in common as men who I have previously dated who were into the same hobbies as me. And these guys are far more successful, better communicators, and better potential partners. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. The whole, what could they possibly see in me type of self doubt that you probably should, work through. Because this seems like you'll always have an issue, especially if the guy is good looking, wondering, why is he talking to me? She says, aside from the obvious fetish dudes, are there any signs I should look out for in them or other future partners? I think it's going to start with you and what you think you need to do to create a you that you think is worthy of these guys. She says, I can't help but wonder if they are just trying to fulfill some fetish until a skinny, pretty white woman comes along for them to take more seriously. Or am I just worrying because there's a small nagging voice telling me that no one would actually want to partner with someone like me? I think you know the answer to that one. That question right there was so specific that it's already telling me that you know what you need to work through. If that's the case, what do I need to overcome that? Though almost all of my dating experiences with white men, I think my brief dip into dating apps has brought up this concern because creepy men have been so vocal about why they are interested, and it gives me pause about the pleasant and decent dudes. A little bit more information. I don't subscribe to the whole high value man woman thing whatsoever. I think is bullshit, quite frankly, but it goes to show how it can still seep into our minds nonetheless. She says, like on paper, I am everything a high value man hates: fat, feminist, educated, tattooed, etc. And I also know I am deserving of healthy relationships without settling because I'm not considered high value. I also know that being fat and the list of other things severely narrows my dating pool, and that's okay. She just says she cannot stop this nagging voice in the back of her head and wonders why there seems to be other seemingly high value men who would be into me that goes ways beyond sexual. Maybe that's the real lesson, that the previous societal standards and now the red pill culture still damages those of us who don't buy into it. Okay, y'all. So y'all heard her whole thing. She's asking for advice. What would you tell this woman? What would you tell her, based on what she's saying? I've already kind of given my piece, so I don't need to reiterate it. I think she needs to work on herself and figure out what it is that she would be. That would make her feel like she is a good candidate on paper for these men. But y'all weigh in. And don't forget to like, comment, share. And I'll do a part 2 with her jury duty story time. So here's the part two from the woman that was asking for advice. She has a jury duty story. She says, I'm not truly sure how to organize this story, but the defendant was an early 30s black man who was accused of robbing a home business. First of all, this idiot served as his own defense. As you might imagine, he was not an attorney and he did not have any legal experience. I'm just going to brain dump everything that I can remember and hope that it plays out well as a story. He was an aspiring rapper musician who was in his mid 20s when the crime took place. He already had felonies, both for firearm possession and robberies. At the time of the crime, he was unemployed and broke. He started dating a plus size white woman in her late 30s who worked for the business he and another man ended up robbing. The nature of the business was a home business that sold Second Amendment related products, not the Second Amendment products themselves, and made most of their money at trade shows in various states across the country. In addition to being his girlfriend, the older woman was also the manager of his struggling rap duo that he was in with his co conspirator. She was financially struggling, but somehow so in love that she was basically bankrolling this man's life and career, letting him drive her car, etc. After going to some of these trade shows with her, which was illegal for him due to his felonies, he and the girlfriend realized that robbing this business, one she worked for, mind you, would be an easy hit for cash. Along with the girlfriend, he and his co conspirator planned a robbery which targeted the business owner and another coworker one night after a trade show where they made probably between $8,000 and $12,000. The girlfriend drove the getaway car. Several mistakes were made in the commission of the crime. They wore masks, but the co conspirator threw his mask out the car window a few blocks away from the crime, which the police were able to retrieve DNA from. The defendant also called his co conspirator by his rap name, which one of the witnesses recalled. The robbery was also caught on surveillance, even though you couldn't see his face. Honestly, though, the state's evidence on him was super lacking. In fact, they were easily able to convict his girlfriend and the co-conspirator based on evidence, but they didn't have a whole lot on him, and the idiot girlfriend sat in prison for about 3 years, unwilling to snitch on him. She was willing to take the heat of buying a weapon for a felon, big deal, and conspiring in a robbery like an idiot. But then the investigators presented her with a litany of digital evidence that convinced her to make a deal. This same evidence is what convinced the jury to find him guilty. During the course of their relationship which was maybe 3 years at most, he was cheating on her with several women. Not only did he cheat on her with several women, but had 5 children with other women during their relationship. Emails, texts, Facebook messages, etc. revealed this information. Even when presented with this information while she sat in prison, it took her almost 2 years to talk. Why do people protect cheating, lying criminals? Why? This woman was no peach and very unlikable, total criminal, just like him. But it was kind of heartbreaking to see her on the witness stand having to recount the ways he betrayed her and how she ruined her life for him. And the prosecution hammered home how much he betrayed her, how many women he was sleeping with, and how these infidelities resulted in 5 children. It was harrowing to listen to her revisit how she realized that he had been using her the entire time. He was using her for money, transportation, shelter, and free labor as his manager who booked shows, contacted venues, and set up and paid for recording sessions, did graphic designs, reached out to labels, etc. She was never his preference at all. She was a fool who catered to his dusty king baby ass at best. At worst, she was now a felon because of him. These dudes are vampires. They're parasitic. But if you allow them to be parasitic and you know that they are, well, like, okay, just don't do this. Don't be like this person. He was a smart guy. You can tell by how he spoke as his own attorney and how he was slick in his digital communications to not outright mention the robbery while planning it. He was not an attorney, and the prosecution ate him alive. The smoking gun evidence, it was kind of a plot twist, for me at least. The prosecution presented social media messages where he told a woman he was struggling for money and then about having robbed someone shortly before, giving details about the fact that he used a pew pew and his face was covered. I didn't realize it at the time, but the woman he was messaging was called to the witness stand, and I noticed that he seemed deeply uncomfortable when she was being questioned. I thought it was because he knew the contents of those messages were what would bring him down. Only later, when I discussed it with my fellow jurors, did I realize that the young woman was trans. The messages the prosecution presented were only a portion of his full messages with her. But we had access to the full messages in evidence later where they were discussed in their past dalliances um, before she transitioned from male to female. How the defendant's brother was also hooking up with her before she transitioned. So this Dusty didn't want to work a regular job because he wanted to portray this lifestyle of being a successful heterosexual rapper. Instead, he lied, cheated, used, and ruined a woman's life, all for a few $1,000s split three ways. And in the wake of it all, five innocent and now five fatherless children. It reinforced what many of us are saying: men hate women only find them useful when they can give them something. Also, when the defendant cross examined the ex girlfriend, he was so smug looking as he asked her questions about his infidelities and as he alluded to the idea that she was lying to get back at him. It was a stark contrast to how terrified and uncomfortable he looked when he cross examined the trans woman he messed around with, knowing that his bisexuality might be exposed on record. This is a great story time to just remind people that when you see that you are giving, 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 that your time, efforts, and resources are going to somebody else and they are not being reciprocated, that you need to extricate that parasite as quickly as possible, like squish the parasite and make sure that that doesn't happen again, because they will bleed you dry. They will bleed you dry. And as they are working to get themselves where they need to be off of your time, energy, and resources, and then laugh at you for you helping them. So stop doing this. Stop being a host for a parasite. That's the story time. That is this. This is definitely needed, and I appreciate this woman reaching out to me with these stories because this is a cautionary tale. Do not allow a parasite or a vampire to take your time, energy, and resources. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.